Hello all.
Greetings.
Oh God, it's Eric. You're following me around today, aren't you?
I'm sorry.
Fair enough, I'm worth stalking.
Yeah, because you'll join after me, right? So it's difficult to follow
first.
somebody and joining before.
I was here first.
I want that bumper sticker. I'm worth stalking.
Our join rate is still pretty high. We'll wait a couple of minutes more before starting. Thanks everyone who's sharing video already. If you aren't and you can, please do so. If you've not been to one of these calls before, note that they are being recorded and the result will be published at YouTube at the end. It looks like our join rate has slowed down, so we'll go ahead and get started. Thanks everyone for taking time out of your day to have these conversations. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, share video if you can, but remember that the conversation is being recorded and will be posted to YouTube. So, I assume everybody has the notes up in front of them. Does anyone have anything that they would like to add to the agenda as represented on those notes? All right, we'll jump into what we've got. First is an update on the email processing transition. We are in the middle of a project to move IETF into a cloud-hosted server, preserving its structure, being an OpenSUSE server still. Once we finish that transition, that is moving. The final production server has been provisioned. The addresses it ended up with are checking out as having good mail reputation. We'll be working on changing DNS to include them as addresses that we might be sending from soon, and starting a warming program as soon as they have the appropriate proxy software installed on both IETF and this target server. There's a plan where the addresses will be warmed by having mail being emitted from the new addresses in small amounts, ramping up to everything coming from the new addresses by the time we make the final cutover. I've been told that the final cutover is expected to be by the end of the month. I'm asking for more details on the intermediate steps. One of the intermediate steps involves a little bit of downtime for moving the mailman databases across. We will announce that downtime ahead of time to the community and make sure that it's at a time that is appropriate for the other activities that are going on in the IETF before we get to it. Does anybody have any questions about this step in the email processing transition?
So may I assume that will be happening in January or something like that?
I'm being told that we should be off of IETF by the end of January. I'm still waiting for details on the plan before I'm comfortable saying that is actually going to happen.
Yeah, Robert, what what sort of testing have they done to make sure that people will accept mail from our new IPs? That's normally known as warming it up.
I missed what you said right before warming it up.
Basically, have they warmed up the IPs? Do we know that people will accept
No,
our
they're
mail?
going to start warming the IPs this week.
Okay.
One thing that I want to add that is related, we made some changes on IETFA for the way that we have postfix configured. We have removed a requirement that reverse DNS be populated so that we will accept more mail over IPv6 from places where the people that are sending mail from IPv6 can't populate reverse DNS. And we've changed the size of essentially the worker queues for its input to accept more work at a time. And this is all been a net positive, just looking at the overall behavior of the machine. And we'll continue to track the efficacy of those two changes over the next several days. All right. The next thing that we had in the hot topics for discussion were refining the requirements for replacing the liaison management tool. I've taken the several puddles of requirements that have been discussed to date, converted them into a set of issues and discussions in GitHub at the repo that is linked in the notes. This conversation is being, the conversations in particular, the discussions are being vetted with the IB and IESG. So I think, Wes, you're supposed to prod the IEB. If you want me to instead, let me know.
I thought Miria was going to do that, but anyway, I mean, that's the liaison coordinators are more closely aligned. I am no longer one, but I will reach out and poke them. Yes.
Okay. You want me to quit bothering you directly about this particular problem?
So I'm the tools liaison, but Miria is actually a liaison coordinator. So you can imagine that there's a bit of role confliction there. Or
yeah, we'll get it all figured out. And then anybody that's on from the IESG, please help point to the existence of this and help refine any requirements from the IESG's perspective. So one discussion that is in that set of requirements is a question about the liaison contact roles in the data tracker. Way back in the day when the liaison tool looked very different than it looks now, there was a way for each group to configure a set of people that would always be in the to and a different set of people that would always be in the CC for any liaison statement that went from or to that group. That's evolved over time to the current implementation, which uses those liaison contact and liaison CC contact roles. I don't know that. No, I can't say that. Let's say it this way. There is confusion about what the liaison contact role is all about. With that explanation, maybe it's something that we should leave, but there's been a suggestion to just remove it. There is some concern that the roles have not been being maintained since it hasn't really been clear what they were for. There are hundreds of affected roles if we were to remove it, and it might change the intent of what was happening with the liaison messages going back and forth. So if you have opinions, if you are one of these people that are a liaison contact and you would be, negatively affected if we remove these things, please chime in with an opinion, preferably in that discussion. If you think that it's a archaic concept and we don't need to have it anymore and we can simplify, raise that point as well. I'll move on to the next item. We've continued the work that we started reporting on last month. I don't have a great deal of additional structure that we've developed to discuss, so I'll just point to the notes from last month for the paths that we were exploring. We're pretty far down the path, I think, now of having made some choices for what we want blob storage to look like. We've got some moderately good answers for how we're going to change the data tracker such that the client is accessing most things from the blob storage relatively directly, as at least not having the bits flow back through the data tracker when they're being used. And we're still working through what we'll do to mitigate the latencies, the how much slower reading things from the blob store are compared to reading things even from an NFS mounted disk for those few processing paths where we are going to have to reread bits and do computation on them over and over. And the answer to that's probably going to be something, caching, but that's where we are in this process. I'm expecting this to move forward in very large chunks over the next 2 weeks on the outside. The other thing that we managed to work in over the end of year was adding an additional bit of monitoring for the NFS mount performance from the data tracker's perspective. So we have a monitoring point for that and can watch if we end up with, if we're still in a world where we're relying on the NFS mount at the next meeting for any of the applications, we'll at least be able to watch it and know if it's starting to go odd early and can take corrective action. Any questions about where we are in that process? All right. Our next hot topic is to talk a bit about how we're using managed challenges at Cloudflare. Beginning primarily with some pointers that some people that were participating at the last IETF meeting who also have been working for Cloudflare gave us. Been using the managed challenged concept to slow down the worst of the abusive bots that have been affecting our overall system performance just because of overload. We've primarily been putting these in front of things that are truly abusive, that things that look like fuzzers, things that look like they're trying to find WordPress instances and break them, versus things that look like they are scrapers. But if they're just if they're just scrapers, if they're not honoring the requests to avoid certain pages, or if their request rates are just outrageously high and throttling isn't slowing them down, the managed challenge slows them down much better. What the managed challenge is a bit of embedded JavaScript that might present the user with something to do, might look for the user moving the mouse around, something that a bunch of Cloudflare engineers have built a set of rules around to decide that, yes, the thing that's trying to consume this is willing to act human enough that it's not likely to be a piece of automaton that's tearing that is going to tear something up. So we put the managed challenge in front of the data tracker's login endpoint and its account creation endpoint. I thought during the meeting, but it might have been sometime in December, but it was very close to when the meeting was. That's been working out very well. During the break, we had a particularly intense botnet set of accesses that all came out of China and involved dozens of autonomous systems, hundreds of IP addresses. But looking at the traffic in aggregate, it was clear it was all one command and control. All of these bots were hitting the same set of URLs in the same sequence. The traffic pattern from each of the ASNs looked exactly the same as it was flowing through. And the only way that we found that we could stop that was to basically put a managed challenge in front of all of China. So that's currently in place at the moment for any endpoint that's not intended to be a machine readable endpoint. The APIs are still open. The bib XML public RFC endpoints aren't challenged, but everything else is challenged. And we're tuning these challenges based on feedback. We haven't gotten very much feedback at all. One we got from Stephen Farrell, who noticed the challenge at the login endpoint and was wondering if there was something he could do to not have to deal with that. Although he found ways in that he's comfortable dealing with it existing. We got one report from someone coming from a network in China that is getting behavior that, as described so far, we're not expecting. They're getting the challenge far more frequently than they should be. Once the challenge is satisfied, we have a configuration knob for how long we should wait until the thing that was identified to be challenged is challenged again. And we've currently got that set for, I think a day is where we put it. Yeah. But this person's claiming that they're getting challenged on every request. So we're trying to get into a dialogue so that we can diagnose why that's happening. But otherwise, we haven't seen complaints.
And that person in China did write back to me after I suggested that they try logging into the data tracker, and they confirmed that that did solve the issue for them.
Okay.
So
I am.
are you also getting attacks on the API endpoint from those same addresses?
So far, no.
Okay.
It will eventually happen, and it will eventually happen that we'll get these massive attacks from other parts of the world. I am anticipating that we will find ourselves before long where we are just using the managed challenge for almost all of our traffic from anywhere. So,
Does this also affect or impact? I have noticed, at least for a couple months, that I will get into Meet Echo just fine. I don't wind up with a trip through the, with a data tracker login popping it and going away. And then I go to the notes and I want to write, and then I get data tracker login. And of course, the annoying part is that our hedge doc after that challenge doesn't leave you back at the notes. It leaves you back at the front page, which for a lot of users, I think is they're like, oh, well, I don't know what I want now, right? At least I know I just, go back twice and go forward and I'll be at the right place. But I think for a lot of people, that's they're lost at that point.
Yeah, I think it's a completely separate issue. The challenge won't make that any better or any worse.
So we're not
having to log
people to expire faster out of the
that is correct.
Yeah, okay.
Is the reason for the challenge on the login, is that because of the processing time involved in password hashing or something like that? Or
no, people see something that
some
says
other reason,
/login/ and they put bots that try to crack passwords on it.
Okay.
Don't reuse that password between your bank account and the data tracker.
So I'm not sure whether Mike's question was about the API endpoints or something else. So are we attacked on the API endpoints?
No, Michael was asking about whether or not the login, whether or not the challenge would cause you to have to re-authenticate with the data tracker from Notes or some other application that's using OIDC to do authentication, and they're independent, right? The issue that you ran into with the Notes, even though you were successfully logged into Metaco, that Notes is a separate OIDC client, and whatever tokens that you happen to have there had expired.
Yeah, so, I just raised the same problem just 5 minutes ago. But how can we protect then the API? Because at some point of time, the attack will become there, right? And the API can be very time consuming as well. So will we require credentials?
That's what we'll have to do for expensive endpoints, yes.
Okay. We live in the world. And by the way, I would welcome if we make the challenge worldwide and not limited to one country. Right.
All right.
Eric, Eric, I do understand, but that would mean considerable pain for lots of other people on the basis of, sort of us being concerned about the optics of this. Is that?
I know.
Yeah.
I mean, there is the kind of the fairness of the world, right, or the unfairness. But I think it's in 1 year, like Robert, I think the attacks will come from everywhere, right? So it's only a matter of time.
Yeah, but I think that our footing should be that we only use these when they need to be used, and that we try to reduce the friction as much as we can. So. All right, if we don't have anything further, those are the things that we had really identified as hot topics for discussion. The rest of it is intended to be taken as read, but if you've got any questions about the reports on the rest of the endpoints, or if you have been working on these applications and have something in particular that you want to call out, please do so. All right. Does anybody have any other business?
just going back to the XML to RFC, any date on the trust updates? A while back, it was still TBD.
It's still in the
So
hands.
I can tell you where it is. It's with the CCG. We had a call about this right before the holiday, and there are 3 communities that are part of the CCG that mirror the 3 parts of IANA: protocol, parameters, numbers, and names. 2 of those communities said, let's go. And one of the communities, which has 3 representatives, is the names community. 2 of them said, let's go. And the third one said, wait, this is completely broken. And they have to sort that out. And they're trying to reach consensus, not have a vote.
Are they aware of how much leverage they actually have? You know,
Yes, they have.
none at all.
Well, or all of it, depending how you think of it. Because it could lead to unwinding part of the IANA transition if we handle it poorly.
That's why I figured they probably don't want to do that. So I hope they understand that part.
Yeah, we tried to. Anyway, it's one person in the European Union who's very, very upset.
I know it is.
Okay. So we're they said they would caucus. We're giving them to the end of the month before we start screaming. I did send a nudge to make sure that it was, after the holiday hadn't fallen into off the to-do list.
Cool.
All right. So that's all I can do to make it happen.
And thanks for bringing us up to speed.
Sure.
If no one has anything else, thank you again for your time. I expect we'll have our call as scheduled next month, and we'll see you online between now and then.
Sorry, Robert, one thing. I know Roman's on the call, but he's traveling, so may not be able to ask the question. He had a question to ask about IESG dashboards and the timing of that work.
It's as noted in the roadmap, it's behind the work that we're doing on the blob store and the work that we're doing on RPC tools modernization. So, we're still trying to clobber the really major bugs. And if there's something that's hurting very, very badly, let us know. But otherwise, it's looking like March or even after March.
Yeah, that's the clarifying question I wanted to ask. So we're tentatively still shooting for Bangkok, or are we now thinking Montreal? Is that the summer? No, Spain, Madrid.
Yeah, I mean, depending on what kind of troubles that we run into with these other 2 big projects, it could slip past. Bangkok. And if there's something that it's going to be problematic, if it does, we'll cherry pick parts out.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everyone. And we will see you online as we go along.
Okay. Do.